McIntyre Show. Dylan Buckingham, the incomparable Noble McIntyre. Rhymes with winning.
Rhymes with winning.
777.
7,000.
I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah.
That's a call to action.
777, 7,000.
That's perfect.
It's an easy number to remember, and I now have 3 of Oklahoma's 5 area codes. So you can dial 405-777-7000. It'll ring my office. 918-777-7000. And there's a new one, a 539, but I'm working to get the 580 one as well. So I can cover it so that way when we run commercials, I only have to put the 777-7000. It won't matter which area code you use, it'll still get to me.
You do a lot around the state.
Yeah, all over the state.
For OU football, for OU athletics. I will not be impressed with you until you get all 5 area codes.
Well, now I have a bar to reach.
There it is.
I'm going to do what I can.
We got to start with OU basketball. Tough night last night against Texas. You and I talk a lot about OU Texas and what it means from your perspective, where it's you want Oklahoma better than Texas. You're an Oklahoma guy.
Right.
That's what you are. But Porter Moser, your guy, and a guy who I think is a fantastic coach, falls to 0-7 against the Horns. What'd you think of the contest?
Well, I mean, obviously, when you get behind that much in the first half and you're on your home court and you're 0-3 in the conference play and you have to have a win, you've got to come out strong and play strong, and we just didn't do it. Shots weren't dropping, but more than that, we continue to seem to get out-rebounded, so the other team's getting 10, 12, 15 more possessions a game, which is obviously not helpful. But then it's turnovers down the stretch. Oklahoma made a furious second-half comeback. They pull within 3 with 8 minutes to go. Get behind a little bit, pull within 3 again. They do that a couple of times. And there was a stretch with about 5 minutes to go in the game where we'd pulled within 2, and then we, on 4 straight possessions, had turnovers, I believe it was. And you're not going to win those close games. And so when you look at our record right now, we're 0-4 in conference play, but 3 of those losses are just a couple of possession games, and we're not winning the close ones. And so, yeah, it's a killer. And then you combine that with the fact that it's Texas, who, if you're a true OU fan, you just don't like Texas. To quote Baker Mayfield, it makes me puke. And, you want to win. And so we needed that win badly. We all know what happened last year when we started the season strong and then had a tough mid-season, end season, and didn't make the tournament. And, you just don't want to see that happen again.
Is it frustrating for you when you continually see the same mistakes over this? I mean, just this season alone, I go back to the Texas A&M game. Bryson Goodine goes crazy, but yet you still have somebody falling late in the second half for a tie-up. Ball goes the other way. You have a turnover late.
Yep.
I mean, it's the same stuff that keeps happening again. It's the same story. Like, how frustrating is that for you?
Incredibly frustrating. And I know Porter pretty well. I consider him a friend. I really am a big Porter fan. And it's got to be unbelievably frustrating for him, too, because the heat is on. I mean, he knows what happened last year. You've got to come to Oklahoma and make the tournament. And we started off the season unbelievably well. Everybody knows the SEC is strong. I mean, I think preseason we were picked to finish 12th or 13th is all, but yet then we started ranked 12th in the nation and at 13-0. So you're thinking, okay, we're going to have some strong, tough games coming up. We're going to win our share. Well, now we started off in the SEC play and we're 0-4, and so it's tough on him. It's tough on the players, I'm sure. More to your point, you're right. Down towards the end of the game, you have your star player miss the front end of a 1-1 game against A&M. Mm-hmm. You make those two, and the best they can do is tie you up and go to overtime. But he doesn't, and we lose. This game, you have 3-4 turnovers in a row, and you lose. You can't lose those close games. You've got to win those close games.
I had somebody bring this up to me, and I'm all about holding myself accountable. I really, truly am. And you and I have had many conversations about Brent Venables and, hey, let's give him a pass because you're jumping from the Big 12 where you go 10-3, have a great season, to the SEC where you go 6-7. And they asked me, well, you gave Brent Venables a pass for jumping to the SEC. Why not give Porter Moser a pass? And I said, the thing that's different for me on this versus what Venables has is that you have, like, a proven success last year in the Big 12. And yeah, the SEC might be the toughest basketball conference. The Big 12 likely was last year.
Right.
But it's the same story over again. And so that's why I'm like, for me, I think there's a little difference between giving somebody a pass and not giving them a pass.
Well,
in this situation.
Venables got a $44 million pass. They restructured his contract after his 10-3 Big 12 season mid-contract of his first 7-year deal. They did not have to do that. And when they did that, they extended out the life of the contract, which made his buyout $44 million. So then you roll into SEC play. I'm sure OU had their reasons for wanting to do that. But as you look back now, probably some folks said, look, you did great in the Big 12. Let's see how you do in your first year at the SEC before we restructure your contract, if we restructure your contract. But it worked out for Venables in the sense that he went 6-7. But for that $44 million buyout, he'd seriously be on the hot seat. They didn't do that for Porter. Porter doesn't have the advantage of having his contract restructured last year, so the buyout's bigger. So the heat's hotter on him. Now, be that as it may, it's tough for any coach to have to rebuild every single year. And that's what he's had to do. He's been in a rebuild mode every year. Last year, the team did fairly well, but then they lost out towards the end, and half the team or more is gone. So you're bringing brand new players in and trying to get them up to speed each year versus the old days of Duke where you'd get a freshman that was there until he was a senior. You don't see that anymore. And then you combine the fact that OU doesn't allocate the NIL funds to basketball that the other schools are doing within our conference. Most all of it goes to football. And so he's at a disadvantage.
Okay, so with that being said, Jeremiah Fears is in the fold, reclassifies, top 15 recruit. I mean, fantastic player. We all know that. Governor Stitt has recently just signed some legislation into law here, which basically says what?
It says that you can donate to the school directly, to the sports program at the school, and then they will funnel the money to the NIL program to make it so where it's tax deductible. So it's a 6-month period of window where you can make those contributions, and it's going to be a tax deductible, which is very, very important to some people and very, very important to businesses that you can get a deduction on that. And so people that might not otherwise have given will. Will that help? Yes, it will. It will increase donations to that program in the NIL fund over that period of time. It will drop off after that's over. But is that the answer? I don't think it is. The reason I don't think it is a long-term answer is Oklahoma is like a lot of states. Unless you are from a state that has a billionaire that loves your program, you're at a disadvantage until they enact some rules and some guidelines and some guardrails that currently don't exist. So you have Michigan that wanted to go after the quarterback that was going to go to LSU, I believe, or Notre Dame. But you got Larry Ellison, who's a billionaire, multi-billionaire, who said, I will pay anything I can. And in combination with Dave Portnoy from Barstool, wanted to get that player. And they did. You've got the Oregon Ducks, who were ranked number 1 this year, undefeated all year until they lost, who has, was it Knight that's backing them? He's a billionaire. Oklahoma doesn't have that. Texas has got oil revenue. If you don't have a billionaire backing you where you can just go buy whatever player you want, as long as the system's in place where you can do that, because they're even tampering midseason now with each other, you can't even do that in the NFL, you're going to be an extreme disadvantage. I think there's a solution. I don't think Oklahoma will do it, but I think there's a solution that would put Oklahoma on par with any school, whether they have a billionaire or not.
And I'm going to ask you about that in a second, but I want to stick on this subject for just a second because I know where you're going to go. But you said this legislation, that's a tough word for somebody
legislation.
Who's not an attorney. 6 months, right?
6 months.
Why 6 months? Is that more like to react off the NCAA situation where there could be some stuff thrown out there by them?
I think so. I think everybody's waiting for some new rules to come in place, which will enact a hard cap and some transfer rules and some shorten the window for the transfer portal, which is causing some major problems right now. You have players that have ended their season. There's a bowl coming up, but they can already enter in the transfer portal. You've got to change some of that. And so I think there was a legislature saying, look, we're going to give you a window of time to raise some money. We'll make it deductible during that window of time, and we can always come back and reevaluate whether we want to extend it. It is not unusual for tax deductions, whether it be state or federal, to be enacted for a period of time, and then sometimes they're extended and sometimes they're not.
Interesting, because what I was going to go with on this, because we've heard so much, and I think this is where it gets confusing for the folks that are, I don't want to say casual fans, but they know what NIL is. They know how players are getting paid and what their value is now. But what does this legislation alone do for, how do I put this? How does it affect collectives? Because is it making collectives obsolete? I know Oklahoma's in a different situation, as you explained with Oregon, Michigan, the billionaires backing them. But does this mean like one Oklahoma could be in trouble? Like,
well, I think every collective will be in trouble or is subject to the economy. So you have a collective right now, and you've had a stock market that has trended up for a number of years. They don't remember the last correction. They certainly don't remember the depression. Some people remember the recession. The first time you have another recession in this country in which the economy contracts and the stock market starts down, the first thing that wealthy people cut are the things that aren't absolutely necessary. They want to fund their business and their families first, and that should be primary. So right now you've got a lot of people that are willing and excited under this new thing's great. NIL's brand new. We can participate. We can help, that are throwing money at these collectives, maybe on a short-term basis, maybe even on a longer-term basis. But the minute you have a correction of the economy in this country and it pulls back and contracts, you're going to have people say, I don't have the funds to give to the NIL. The problem is going to be is if you've offered a long-term NIL deal to a player, say 3-4 years, and now those funds are not there for year 3 or year 4 because the donors aren't donating because of an economy contraction. And you're going to have some problems down the road when that happens. So far, that hasn't happened. but it will, which is why there needs to be some better rules in place. It's going to happen eventually, whether it happens because people can't live up to the deals they've offered. You're already seeing athletes around the country that said they were verbally offered something or promised something, they didn't get it, and they're suing head coaches, they're suing donors, they're suing schools, and it's going to be very litigious for a while until this gets straightened out.
So basically, if you're just joining us or if you're diving into this conversation, we're saying that there is allocation of funds that need to be at least thrown towards OU basketball because there's other SEC schools that are allocating more funds.
Yeah, I think that OU probably ranks towards the bottom for how much has been allocated. I think OU has allocated $1.5 million, maybe $2 million, which sounds like a lot of money in the old days, but today it's not. I mean, you're not keeping Fears next year. Even if he wasn't in the portal, he would end up somewhere else because he's been such a rock star for OU this year, and someone would come along and bid more than Porter can bid to keep him. And that's the problem. If you don't have the economic ability to play ball, let's put it in the legal world. So McIntyre law has been around now for a very long time. I've been practicing 30 years. I spend millions of dollars advertising to brand my name. I'm also a trial lawyer, but I spend millions of dollars advertising. How is somebody that graduated from law school last year that's just starting to practice supposed to compete with me? They can't. They don't have the experience. They don't have the money. They don't have the skills yet. It's very, very difficult. So now you translate that into college sports. How is a school supposed to compete with school A, who has seemingly unlimited resources?
Arkansas. Let's say Arkansas.
Or Texas, or you name a few schools. Or you mean Arkansas in the sense they don't have the resources?
No, they do with Tyson Foods. Like,
right, okay.
Apparently Calipari has literally like the Tyson Foods blessing to say, go spend it.
Go whatever you want.
Go get it.
So how is, pick a school, pick New Mexico State, supposed to compete with Arkansas, with Texas, with Oregon, with Michigan? And the answer is they can't. And so what you're going to have until there's something in place where everybody's living under the same rules is the top is going to dominate. To use a terminology that people are used to in everyday society, the rich get richer. And it will continue to be that way.
Interesting. So all that to say, you were just kind of brainstorming on this about how do I help my school?
Right.
How do I help this place that I love? And you came up with quite the interesting idea to help facilitate some funds for this.
Yeah, and I haven't heard anybody else say this. I haven't heard, it just was my idea. I was listening to a radio broadcast the other day that Joe C. was on where he was talking about this new OU deal, or where the Oklahoma legislature has passed that we just visited about. And I thought, how do you stay on par with some of these schools that have Tyson Foods when we don't, Larry Ellison when we don't, Paul Knight when we don't? And it's okay, how can you raise the most money if you're not doing it from one wealthy person? How do you get multiple people to do it? Well, in Oklahoma, we can all look at the revitalization of downtown Oklahoma City that came about because of the MAPS project, Metro Area, I forget what MAPS stands for, a number of years ago, which was a percentage of a sales tax that initially was on people staying in the hotels, so we were getting people from out of Oklahoma to help pay for it, and then expanded to some other things. MAPS 1 went into MAPS 2, went into MAPS 3, went into MAPS 4. It's only because of MAPS that we have the Thunder here. It's only because of MAPS that the Paycom was built. It's only because of MAPS that the next $1 billion arena is going to be built. And it was built relatively painlessly because you had thousands, if not millions, of people paying a fraction of a penny sales tax on every purchase they made, and over time that money built up. Well, you live in an NIL era now. The state of Oklahoma wants the Oklahoma schools to succeed and be on par with other schools, whether that's University of Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Tulsa University, whatever it may be. How do you generate an amount of money that's needed to participate at today's level? Well, you do a MAPS for NIL, and not just for OU, but for the state, and you allocate it based on however you want to allocate it. You come up with a formula, and you put before the people, hey, it's going to be just a fraction of a fraction, say a tenth of a penny. You're paying 6 3/4, it's going to be 6 5/8, or 6 13/16 is what it would be if you only did a quarter. And it's going to be over a period of time, and we're going to utilize those funds to help coaches in that NIL portal get the players they want. It would raise an astronomical amount of money, more so than any other state's doing, and put us at an advantage instead of a disadvantage at very, very little cost to your everyday Oklahoman. The problem you have is not everybody's a sports fan, so It might be difficult to pass that.
So that's my question. We talked about this on the Land Down the Law segment we have every Thursday on 107.7 The Franchise, and one of the blowbacks I got back on it shortly after the segment ended was we can't afford to shelter the homeless or feed those that are hungry right now. So why would anybody vote yes on this to try and facilitate just better sports product? for everybody.
Except that we do feed the homeless and we do shelter the homeless and we do have programs at great expense to the taxpayers to take care of those social needs that we have in our country. So it's a complete false statement to say we can't do this, we don't do this. We are doing this. Can you do it more? Do people drive around and see people on the streets that are homeless? Yes, they do. Does that mean that person didn't have a shelter they could go to and just chose not to for whatever reason? There's some of that. There's always going to be needs out there which you try to meet, but you can't meet them all. Look no further than California and what's happening now with the wildfires in California. Huge criticism now because the state of California and LA cut the firefighters' budget by $45 million last year. At the same time, they spent $525 million to house and feed illegal immigrants. So, okay, at the expense of people that lived here, you did a good program. You took care of some folks that aren't supposed to be here, but you took care of them. But there was a cost that came with that. And so if you can't do everything, you do the best you can. That same statement, if we can't feed the homeless, why should we do that? If you took that to its final conclusion, you would have never done MAPS at all, because we're building a $1 billion arena that's keeping the Thunder here, which is bringing revenue here, which makes the state excited and something to do, and we can back a team, which is bringing revenue in that you wouldn't have but for that. You can't do these social programs that you want to do unless you have a tax base to do it with. So you need to continue to build Oklahoma and expand in Oklahoma. The more eyes on Oklahoma football and Oklahoma State football, the more revenue that comes in through TV deals that goes to the universities that the legislature doesn't have to allocate, which means they have more funds to allocate to these other programs. And so it's not one or the other. You can do both. What we're asking in my proposal is that people voluntarily say, I'll pay a tenth of a penny, and I'll help the universities in my state because I care about the universities in my state.
McIntyrelaw.com. Noble McIntyre. Rhymes with winning.
Rhymes with winning.
777?
7,000.
Attaboy. I mean, that's on paper, it sounds great. I mean, it really does. And it's interesting. I mean, I know you know the right people. Let's see if you can get this thing enacted.
I actually do know the right people in that regard. I haven't researched the legality of all of that, but I cannot imagine the legislature would have a hard time passing something that would make that permissible if we put it before the vote of the people. The people can vote on whatever they want. If the people voted to do that, that becomes the law of the land. And it would be amazing if we could do that. And I promise you, if Oklahoma pulled it off, other states would try to emulate Oklahoma because they would want that same resource. Because, again, don't forget, a huge percentage of what's happened with the MAPS fund to the redevelopment of downtown Oklahoma City came from residents that don't live in Oklahoma. It was visitors. It was a tax on the hotels, a tax on the rental cars. And outside Oklahomans help pay for stuff that Oklahomans are enjoying now.
Interesting. Have you proposed this to Joe C yet?
No, but I should. I hope he watches this podcast.
I know. You should send a little text message and say, hey, I got an idea.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
Let's pass this.
I mean, I think he knows some people too, just like you.
I got my cell phone. We can call Kevin Stitt right now.
I'll let you handle that. Okay, I wanted to ask you this real quick. The defensive coordinator situation in Oklahoma. We did hear that West Virginia had doubled Zach Alley's salary, which I still think there's more to it than that. Honestly, again, with the new contract that was allegedly in his hands, that Josie was trying to take care of him, that they had crossed that bridge, it sounds like he wanted a different opportunity.
Right.
Fine. Cool. But as an Oklahoma supporter, are you okay with them not having a defensive coordinator, or at least any smoke to a fire right now? Because there's nothing. You're not hearing a thing. It's led to some people saying that there's rumors Jim Knowles could be on the way here because of his ties to Oklahoma, who's been at Ohio State, of course, previously at Oklahoma State before that. Where do you think this thing lies today, and are you okay with the time it's taking?
Well, I think it's taking the amount of time because they want to get the right person and the best person. I think that we all believe that what happened with Gundy when he went away as our offensive coordinator and they stepped up and they got Joe Finley and
Seth Littrell.
That those two internal guys, great guys, arguably would have never been hired as an offensive coordinator, whether co-offensive coordinator or not, by any other Power 5 school, not because they're not good guys or smart coaches, they just didn't have the experience. And Oklahoma rushed that decision because of the timing with what happened with Gundy. And I think Oklahoma doesn't want to do that again. They want to make sure we get the great guy because we're on our third guy in 3 or 4 years. I think that what you're saying, where we're not even hearing any rumblings of anything, think about it from Joe C's standpoint. He wants to go find the best person. But he knows if that name leaks, other schools are going to go after the same guy. And so to the extent you can keep that private for as long as possible, you do. Is the timing tough? Is it taking longer than what we would all want? Yeah, we obviously all want to hear a big splash hire and be excited about Oklahoma football just like we are every year. It just hasn't happened yet. But Joe C's had some remarkable hires over the years. You put some good trust in him. I know that when we first got Venables, everybody was excited. You have people now that maybe not as much because we haven't had the success we want. But I think we're right. I think we're close. I think we're on the verge. And last year, what team can predict all those injuries that we had? At one point we were throwing it to the guy that brought the water out because every receiver was hurt. And, they called and asked if I had any eligibility left. And I did, but I just couldn't run the 40 faster than 17 and a half seconds. So I was out. But, we had so many injuries. And, if we can get that fixed and get some good players, we're going to be fine.
Well, I knew that the problem with you also was not just that, the 40 time, but I do know that, you would have really instituted a quarterback battle.
Yeah.
With
yeah.
your ability to throw
because
the ball.
I don't remember if I told you this. When I was in high school, maybe I did tell you this. Why you're bringing it up? So when I was in high school at Burns Flat, I loved leaving at Burns Flat. I was a wide receiver on offense, but I also could throw the ball further than anybody on the team. Problem is, I could throw further than anybody on the team, but I had zero accuracy. And so anytime we were behind at the end of a half or the end of a game, we would run a double reverse pass, and we were frequently behind. And so it would be a double reverse pass where I ended up with the ball, and my only job was to throw it as far as I could because everybody knew it wasn't going. I couldn't point it anywhere. I could just fling it. And so my senior year, I like to tell folks, we threw that pass 9 times, and I completed 3 to us, 3 to them, and 3 to nobody. And so for 1 touchdown. And so technically 6 of my 9 passes were complete. It's just 3 went to the other team. So yes, there would be a serious quarterback battle if I was brought up and had a year of eligibility. Mateer would wish he had gone somewhere else.
Are you feeling good about him? Do you feel like this process together with Ben Arbuckle is going to be a successful one?
I think so. I saw an ESPN deal the other day about the top quarterback positions through the portal and where teams ranked on how well they had done on selecting a quarterback, and OU was up there at number 1. But Mateer can be the greatest guy in the world. If he doesn't have anybody to throw to or a line to block for him, he's going to have the same problems as our quarterback did last year. And, it should tell you something that is as bad as we were harping on Jackson Arnold. Auburn saw enough to give him a couple $1 million and brought him in. And so, you put Jackson Arnold on a team with a great blocking like Baker had and some receivers like Baker had. He's not Baker, but he'd have done a lot better than he did. You take Dylan Gabriel, who crushed it at Oregon this year. If he had the receiver problem and the line problem, he wouldn't have had the same year. Yeah. And so Mateer, I think, will come in and do well, but you still have to provide him with the other tools in the terms of receivers and blockers.
I do think there's some similarities between him and Baker, honestly. You talk about smaller guys, use their legs, not highly recruited,
right.
3-star recruits, go to a smaller place, transfer to OU, got a little moxie to him. It's like
a chip on their
swag.
shoulder, a little gravitas.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of similarities there, and I know that's a big thing to throw out there considering how great Baker was, where he's regarded and revered in Oklahoma lore, but there is something to that, don't you think?
There is. I say there's only one Noble McIntyre. There's only one Baker Mayfield. So nobody's going to supplement him in that regard. But, yeah, I think he is a lot of similarities. Speaking of Baker, God, I hate that they got beat. Baker does everything he can, and that defense let him down again. And I know we weren't going to talk about Tampa Bay, but, God darn it, come on. Give Baker a shot. But, yeah, I think Mateer's got a good chance to come in and step up and be that guy that everybody just falls in love with. And I hope he does because, like I said, I love the University of Oklahoma, love college football, and I hate all the other teams. And so I want us to do really, really well. And I use hate as an actual word. I don't like anybody else but us.
Well, hate speech there.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
That.
Maybe North Dakota State. They're in I'm from Fargo, North Dakota.
Yeah.
My dad played college football for North Dakota State, so I am a North Dakota State fan. And my uncle often tells me how we had a quarterback that went from NDSU to the pros. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, but OU's got 4 currently starting quarterbacks in Spencer Rattler, Baker Mayfield, Jalen, and in Arizona.
Kyler.
Yeah, Kyler,
yes.
Which is pretty amazing. Out of the 28 teams, 4 of them were OU quarterbacks.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Absolutely crazy. I want to go with this one more little thing on football before we kind of dive into a couple other things.
Okay.
Ben Arbuckle comes and is supposed to be the guy. And you can even make a fun little case that, Arbuckle and Mateer are like Riley and Baker. All that to say, though, I think there's a great thing when a youthful coordinator comes in. But do you buy into this where somebody says, well, he's never called plays in the SEC? I don't know if it's going to work.
No, I don't. Look, Lincoln was from Muleshoe, Texas, and, Arbuckle talks like Lincoln. They have the same mannerisms. It's kind of scary. But, no, I think that, there's a number of coaches. I don't care who you are. Saban didn't start at Alabama. He was a nobody at one point. You pick the coach. They all have to start somewhere. Tell me who had ever heard of the Thunder basketball coach on any real level before he's become the coach of the best team in the NBA, arguably against Cleveland. It's going to be a great game coming up, by the way. And, you got to start somewhere. So plays are plays. Games speed is different, but you see coaches that successfully make the leap from college to pro occasionally, from high school to college. It can happen. And so I don't buy into that argument at all. If that were the case, then how would Noble McIntyre from Burns Flack, Oklahoma, graduating in class of 21, exceed or be able to compete on the same level with people from Beverly Hills? You wouldn't be able to, but I do. And so, I don't buy into that at all.
Okay, I have to ask you, have you sunk your teeth into the Thunder yet? I mean, I know you've been obviously watching some this year, but I mean, have you really just all the way in yet?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone to several games. I've rented a couple of those little 6-person suites and take my family. I've got a big suite coming up where I'm taking some lawyers that I work with. Yeah, I mean, I love the Thunder. I love when we're doing so well. It's crazy to think that we have a team. I never thought we'd have a better team than when it was, when we had Westbrook and we had, that team back then, Harden, all those guys together. This team's better from top to bottom. And here we are at 35-6, I think, or 35, whatever our record is. We're really, really good. And it's exciting to watch. And if you're a betting person, they cover that line almost all the time. I mean, even the last game where the line was 16.5, they covered that line.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I did buy a half point. I won that by a half point, but yeah.
No judgment here.
No, none at all.
Okay, so one of the things that's been really interesting that I think has kind of captivated a lot of people because there's a lot of money involved in this. The TikTok ban that is, I guess, supposed to be here by Sunday night,
yep.
Something like that. First off, what's that like? How does that even play out over the next, I'll even say, week and a half, considering the fact it's Sunday. We got inauguration coming up, a different administration with a president, potential for other buyers. How does this whole thing look in your world?
Well, it's interesting. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was no such thing as a social media influencer that could make a living on social media. Then you had them kind of come in on TikTok, or not TikTok, Instagram and some other platforms. TikTok blew it up. So you have people out there making an astounding amount of money. Some guy called Mr. Beast. I mean, to just make millions and millions of dollars on these platforms. They're terrified that this is going away. They don't want it to go away. People like me just use it for entertainment. I can go type in Thunder last second shot and I can see it right there on TikTok, or OU play a certain play because somebody's uploaded it. And so I really enjoy it from that factor. The problem is it was done by the Chinese government, owned by a company called Databyte. I think that's their name. And there's an algorithm in there in which the United States government has said is used for spying. And I suspect it is because the Chinese government has spied on this country for years, whether it be military technology or just general businesses. And so the government said, you can't do that. We have too many people uploading stuff and you're spying. Get rid of the algorithm. And they wouldn't. So then they said, you're going to either sell this or shut it down. Well, the Chinese government used our own Constitution against us and said this is freedom of speech and filed a lawsuit to prevent it. It wound its way through the court and was in the Supreme Court this last week. And the United States Supreme Court said, we agree. Shut it down. And so here's what's happening. They've been given the option to either shut it down or to sell it. There is some rumor that Elon Musk, richest man in the world, is looking at buying it. I don't know how much credibility there is to that, but since he bought Twitter, it makes sense. The first phase will come this weekend when it will be removed from the App Store, which means nobody can download it after that. People who still have it can still access things that are on there now. I don't believe new things can be uploaded, but they can continue to app what they're looking at now. The reason there's a phase 1 and phase 2 is they're saying we're going to give you a period of time after we pull it from the App Store to sell this versus pulling out of the United States. If you don't, you're pulling out. You have a date certain, you got to be out of the country, or you can sell it. So there'll be a window of time when the company that's kind of the company for China has the option to either sell it or just say, okay, we're not in the United States anymore. Now, some people are talking about going to a new one called Red Note, which is also owned by the Chinese. You have to be loose brain cells to go to Red Note because when you sign up on that, it specifically says you're agreeing to an algorithm. And the Chinese government can do whatever they want. They can look into all your stuff. People aren't paying attention to that. They're just clicking the box and signing up to it. How popular Red Note will become, I don't know. What I think is more likely to happen is that there will be a buyer and it will continue here but no longer owned by the Chinese government.
Okay, so let me ask you this. As somebody who is obviously well-educated, well in tune with things that are happening, why are you comfortable personally being on TikTok?
The only thing I upload to TikTok, I watch all the TikTok videos. There's a question, okay, they're spying. What are they spying on? Is it data that you're uploading? Is it things that you're watching? What are they doing with the algorithm? I don't know. The only things I've ever uploaded is a couple things of my kids. I had one video that actually went viral, had 7 million views that my staff did called "Will You Watch My Boss for Me?" It was pretty funny. I didn't know what they were doing. So I don't really use it for anything beyond that, but you have a valid question. If there's a spying mechanism, what are they using it for, and how is it being used? And I don't know the answer to that. I know that we have people in the government that are smart folks that do computer technology that's job is to protect us from the government from being hacked. We all know what happens when things get hacked. It's not a good thing. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting how it works out. I don't know that I'm 100% comfortable, but I do enjoy the just, I flip through videos and watch them, and it's entertaining. I think it'll end up being sold.
So you don't mind, like, that's my point though. Like, you don't mind. Yeah, you're comfortable enough to do it, to have it, to where you don't feel like you're in any kind
I don't
of danger
feel like I'm
that.
using it or utilizing or uploading any information that if somebody were to see, looking over my shoulders, it's like try to do the right thing when nobody's watching. Well, at the same time, don't do stuff under the cover of dark and don't think anybody's going to see.
Yeah.
I've never posted anything or looked at anything that if my preacher was standing over my shoulder watching, that I would be apprehensive about. So if they're spying on me, I don't think they're getting anything because I'm not doing anything with it other than pure entertainment.
Gotcha.
But some people are. Some people are posting their kids and where they live and things like that. Now, what would the Chinese government do with that? I don't know. I do know this. They have a long history of hacking and stealing trade secrets, and so it's a little hard to trust them.
That is very, very scary. And one of the things you and I talked about kind of off air a little bit ago was how, like, money could be changing here.
Money's going to change. Money's going to change.
So we're going to this thing that you were talking about.
So if you're out there listening, you've never heard of the CBDC, you should Google it. It's called the Central Bank Digital Currency. The push towards central bank digital currency is that you have countries around the world who have superinflation problems. They've run a severe deficit for years and years. The United States is no different. Mm-hmm. And that one day you run the risk of having what happened to Germany during World War II, when the Deutschmark became essentially worthless. It went from you could buy a loaf of bread with a $2 Deutschmark to an entire wheelbarrow wouldn't do the same thing because it wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, and they had to revalue their currency, and it was a very painful time for the country. And so you have countries that go through that. The United States isn't no different than anybody else. We have an unbelievable deficit. And so you're sitting here looking at the government thinking, okay, what could they do if they ever needed to reset currency? Well, doing a whole different type of currency would be what they would do. Well, if you're going to do a different kind of currency, should you use latest technology? Well, the Chinese government is using digital currency right now. The United States just rolled out something called FedNow. If you Google FedNow, you'll see about it, where they're testing it across the United States, which is a purely digital currency with an eye going towards digital currency across this country for good, no longer being able to use paper money. The problem with that is everything you buy or spend is traceable and trackable. So think about the last several things you've bought that maybe you didn't want anybody to know. Maybe you I don't know, pick something. Maybe you go somewhere you shouldn't go, a club, or buy cigarettes and you told somebody you're not smoking. I don't pick something.
Yeah.
Everything's traceable, trackable, and traceable. Okay, let's say you're sitting and listening going, yeah, but that's fine. I don't do anything like that. I spend my money wisely. I don't mind going to the Paycom and they don't take cash. I use my credit card. That's fine too. But look no further than China. China has enacted a social credit score on all of their citizens. If you jaywalk, there's cameras everywhere. They'll catch you. It'll ding your social credit score. If you do something illegal, it'll ding your social credit score. And it will get to the point where they will not let you use your own currency because they can shut it off. And if somebody else is in charge, if all of your money's in a bank and the bank door gets locked and you can't get your money, I don't care if you have $1 billion in there, you're broke. If all of your money's digital currency and one day the people that are in charge of that turns it off and says, we don't like your politics. We don't like your opinion on that. You posted something we didn't like, and as a punishment, we're restricting your access to your own money. You're in trouble. And so the concern about central bank digital currencies is the fact that governments can use that to influence behavior and restrict your ability to spend, even to the point where you might not be able to travel outside of a certain zone because it might not work there to buy gas. Now, that's a stretch for this country, but other countries will control their people differently. I don't like central bank digital currency because I like having cash in my hand. I know occasionally we have power outages. Ask the people out in California where everything burned, where there's no power lines anymore. If all they have was digital currency and they can't charge their phone, how are they going to buy something? I don't like that. I want a backup plan. But it's coming. It's coming because it's going to be a convenient way for the world governments to work together and change currencies. And one day I think we'll have far less currency than we do now. I mean, there may be just one currency one day. In the Bible it says that, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I feel like it could kind of branch all that together.
Yeah,
like,
well, you think about it. So,
money in
yeah,
Italy,
so
right?
if you're religious and you read the Bible and the Revelation, there's talk of, in the end times, a one world currency where if you don't have it, you can't you can't conduct business and buy and sell anything. And if that were to happen, where you have all these countries come together and everybody's having the same financial problem, they say, look, let's just have one currency. We'll all use the same currency. And it's all accessible at the same time. It sounds like a great idea until it's not a great idea.
Right.
And so, I don't know if that's going to happen in our lifetime as far as one world currency, but I do think in our lifetime you're going to see the United States government go to a digital currency.
So no more dollar bills.
No more dollar bills, no more $5 bills, no more 20s above your visor when you're broke, 100% over your phone.
Weird.
Yep.
Absolutely weird.
Yep.
Wow.
Or your watch, your Apple Watch, but that's what it'll be one day. And initially, the way they will sell it to people is you will have an economic crisis in a given country where there's a major pullback in the economy, or there's just an unbelievable crisis, and there's food lines again like we used to have in this country, and money becomes valueless or not worth as much. And what they'll say is, we're going to get rid of all that old money. We're going to go to this new system. It's all digital. And to get you used to it, we're going to give everybody, think back to COVID when everybody got a check, we're going to give everybody $10,000. Well, if you're sitting there with no money and all of a sudden you got $10,000 in digital currency to use, of course you're going to use that system. And they'll suck you into it, and then that's the only system. So I think the way they get Americans into it is through some crisis where they offer you free money and people step up to use it. I think in other countries where it's more authoritarian, they can just force it on people.
That's Noble McIntyre. He is the smartest person in any room that he goes into.
I don't know about that, but I'll take that title for now.
McIntyre rhymes with
winning. There's a story behind that.
Yeah.
You want me to tell that story?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're in Oklahoma City and you drive down the road, you'll see the billboards, my billboards, and one of them says McIntyre rhymes with winning. I'm not the one that approved to put that up at first. I was meeting with the Whistler sign folks, and they were just wanting to get to know me because I was a new customer, and I had bought 40 of their digital boards around the country, and I made it clear to them, I'm a little different than most trial lawyers most lawyers that advertise, in that I'm actually a trial lawyer. I do stand in front of juries and put on cases. It's a little bit of an enigma to do that, but also advertise, because most people that advertise have a slightly different business model where they settle what they can and refer out what they can't. But because I'm going to be in front of a jury, I need credibility. So I can't run a commercial that says, you had a wreck, I got your check, holding some oversized checks. Mine have to be very high end. So I said, on these billboards, I kind of want to do the same thing. I want it to be very high end and very professional so that nobody thinks that it's, that one of those lawyer skeechy ads. And just in talking to them, they were asking about my growing up in Burns Flat and my family. And I told them a story that when I first started having children, I would tell them, if it's a 2-year-old, and they look at you as dad, and you're everything in the world to them. I could literally have handed my daughter a red crayon and told her it was green, and she would have accepted it. Dad said it's green. It's green. It's not. It's red, but she would have believed it. So when they were little, I would tell them McIntyre rhymes with winning. And what I was doing was I wanted them to have confidence in their family name and know that people watch, and I expect you to take pride in your family name and always do the right thing. Bring honor to yourself, bring honor to your family, because we're winners. McIntyre rhymes with winning. And I told them that for years. And it wasn't until my oldest daughter was 7 or 8 years old and she came home from school and she said, Dad, the teacher says that McIntyre doesn't rhyme with winning at all. And so it kind of became a family joke because clearly they don't rhyme. But I've continued to say that over the years just as a deal. It's my way of saying take pride in who you are, do the best you can. Well, I told that to the Whistler sign folks and they loved it. And they put it up on the billboard. And the first time I saw it, I said, I don't know people what they're going to think of that, because it's a lot like some of these ads that say something, different, whatever, play on words I didn't like. Turns out people love it. People call my office all the time and say it's eye-catching. They get it. They think it's funny. They don't necessarily know the story, but they like it. So I told my sign folks, I said, leave that up. I like it too. McIntyre rhymes with winning. I do try to take pride in myself and do the right thing and to leave the world a better place.
Well, I will tell you, my wife and I were driving, and we saw it. This one in particular wasn't the I-40 one. It was I-35 by Moore, and she saw it. And she goes, McIntyre rhymes with winning? And I go, you know what? Would you like to know the story behind that? And she was like, wow. Like, she loved it. It was great because I think everybody has that feel and love for their family and their daughters.
I want my daughters to do the best they can and believe in themselves and know that their dad is supporting them and that we're winners. We're trying to help other people and leave the world a better place.
And it's a nod to them, too.
It is.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's it for episode 4 of the Noble McIntyre Show.
Thanks for having me.
It's been amazing, as always. We'll be back again in a couple weeks.
Yep.
Chew on these ideas, these thoughts, which you'll be seeing, I'm sure, all over social media. We'll have much more coming up next time. I'm sure a lot of fun to talk as well.
We will.
That'll do it for this episode. Thanks for listening.